Okay, good evening, everybody. First, we want to start off with a big mazel tov to Meir, who is responsible for, I think, filming all of the classes here, which go out and to Torah anytime. And, this is tremendous chesed, and we want to thank him, especially as he just got engaged. So we want to join everybody in wishing him they should build together with his kala, Bais Ne'eman, B'Yisrael. Should be very happy together. They should fill up the home with Torah and lots of happy, healthy kinderlich. Should all walk in the derech HaTorah. So it's nice to be able to talk about something happy in a period of the year which is traditionally a very unhappy time for the Jewish people. The 3 weeks, Bein HaMetzarim, literally between the two walls. This period of time between Shiva'os B'Tammuz, the 17th of Tammuz, and the 9th of Av, the 3 weeks are called Bein HaMetzarim, and it's based on a posuk in Eicha, Perek Aleph Gimel, Kol Rodfeha Hisiguha Bein HaMetzarim. All her pursuers, all those who pursue the Jewish people, Hisiguha, they take over, they reach her, they are able to lasig, to catch her. Bein HaMetzarim, between the walls, and between the walls, as we're saying in this period of time in the year. Ramchal says it in, I think he says it in Derech Hashem, that Jewish time is not something which is merely commemorative. Jewish time is, if you like, it's cyclical. Every Shabbos we revisit the same. Every Shabbos is really Shabbos Bereshis all over again. I think if you remember, we all had a train set when we were young, and the essential difference between a train set and a real train system is that every train set, however sophisticated and however luxurious it was, it always goes round in a circle. And that's really the Jewish calendar. The Jewish calendar goes round in a circle. Every Pesach, the same hashpa'ot, the same influences come down from upstairs. It's the same landscape, so to speak. So every 3 weeks, every year that we come to the 3 weeks, and ba'avonoteinu harabim, through our many sins, Mashiach has not yet come to deliver us. So that same landscape, and as it's a bleak landscape, we revisit. The Bein HaMetzarim has two connotations, at least. Metzar is a wall between a rock and a hard place, as they say in America. Metzar means narrowness, and it's also from a lashon of tsar, which means pain. These are the days which we find ourselves in our weakest and our lowest circumstances. And our plight is that anyone who wants to pursue us and overtake us can overcome us. Frightening time. There are halachas, specific halachas that a father shouldn't strike his child, or a Rebbe shouldn't strike his pupil during these times. Of course, nowadays, if you strike your child, your pupil, they'll probably hit you back. Or if you're lucky, they won't come at you with a knife or an M16. Times have changed, but nevertheless, times have changed. But this is a time where we're in physical danger as much, and therefore there are certain limitations. For example, in the 9 days, a person is not supposed to travel. We're not allowed to put ourselves in situations of sakana, of danger. And I was thinking, if you look out at what's going on out in the streets of Israel right now, the Jewish people are in a great stage of danger. The cracks which have been papering over the elemental differences between the inhabitants of this country are coming very much to the fore now. We see a tremendous split. And of course, anytime the Jewish people are split, that makes us very vulnerable, very weak for outside nations to dictate to us what to do, weak from the inside, those people who live in this country who would like to see us not live in this country become empowered. Then when Klal Yisrael is in a situation like this, it very much reflects the time of being this between a rock and a hard place, Bein HaMetzarim. And I wanted to maybe take some lessons and to understand on a deeper level what's actually going on in these days. and how we see that being manifested before our eyes on what's going on, out on the streets. So the Mishnah and the Rambam explain. Mishnah in Maseches Tainis Perek Damul, the Perek Dalud Mishnah Vav. Chamisha devarim oru es ha'afoseinu b'Shivas B'Tammuz v'chamisha b'Tisha B'Av. 5 things happened to our fathers on the 17th of Tammuz, and 5 things happened on Tisha B'Av. B'Shiva B'Tammuz, on the 17th of Tammuz, nishtabru haluchos. The first tablets were broken by Moshe Rabbeinu. If you remember, when he came down and found the Jewish people were involved in idol worship, and he broke the tablets. And Ubotel HaTamid, on that day in the Beis HaMikdash, first Beis HaMikdash, the Korban Tamid, the daily offering was stopped. V'Hovka Ha'ir, the city was broken into by the Babylonians, the walls were breached, and 3 weeks later, that's when the Beis HaMikdash on Tisha B'Av was destroyed. That was the first break in the walls. For Soref Apostomus Torah, and a Roman official called Apostomus, who was also known as Stephanus. Apostomus, I think, is the Aramaic version of Stephanus, which is Stephen. We don't really know much about this from primary sources. Josephus talks about this. But the Torah was burnt on that day. Va'imid tzelem b'heichal, in the time of Menashe, according to some opinions, a tzelem, an idol, was set up in the heichal, in the courtyard of the Beis HaMikdash. Those of the 5 disasters that happened on Shivas B'Tammuz. And B'Tisha B'Av, on the 9th of Av, another 5 things happened. Nigza al avoseinu shelo yikonsu la'oretz. It was decreed on our fathers they should not enter Eretz Israel. This is, of course, in the time when the Jewish people left Mitzrayim, left Egypt, and were supposed to come into Eretz Yisrael. And if you remember, the Torah describes how spies went out, and they came back and they spoke Lashon Hara about Eretz Yisrael, and they cried that night. And the Gemara says, the Kodesh Baruch Hu said, you cried the lechinam, a crying for naught. This day will be fixed for you as a day of crying throughout your generations. And it was on that day that it was decreed that generation would not enter Eretz Yisrael, that they would all die in the desert, except for Kolev and Yeshua. And on that day as well, v'chorav habayis b'rishona v'shniya, it was on that same day that both the Beis HaMikdash Rishon, the first temple, and the second temple were burnt. The first one by the Babylonians, the second by the Romans. V'nilka de Beta, and a popular city of hundreds and thousands of Jews called Beta, not the Beta, modern day Beta, but the same name. Beta was destroyed, was broken into, and a terrible day of carnage. The Gemara in Gittin describes how hundreds of thousands of Jews were slaughtered, and on that day, the 9th of Av was also V'nechrasha Ha'ir, Turnus Rufus, it says in the Rambam, and it's added in the new Rambams, what's it called? The Frankel edition says Turnus Rufus, Mimalche Romi, from the kings of Rome. One of the kings of Rome, he plowed over Charash es ha Heichal, the sanctuary, B'Svivov and its surroundings, to be Makayim, to fulfill what it says in the Pasuk, in the prophet, Tzion Sodeh Techoresh, that Tzion, Zion, meaning the Beis HaMikdash, will be plowed over like a field. Now we'll come back to this because ostensibly it seems this order on the 9th of Av anyway is certainly not chronological, because the Beis HaMikdash was plowed over before Beta. So it's not a chronological list, so it seems from the fact the Mishnah lists it this way, and the Rambam too, that in some way that the plowing over of the Beis HaMikdash was the nadir, was the worst point of our exile, the worst thing that could have happened. And it has to be understood why plowing over a ruin is something which is so sad. As we're saying now, it seems to be this is the worst of all of these 5 tragedies that happened on Tisha B'Av. What's so bad about plowing over a ruin? And the answer, I think, is that a ruin is a very sad thing, but a ruin is also a blueprint. When you have a ruin of something, it's a reminder of what was and what could be again. When you take a ruin and you plow it over, you turn it into a beautiful field. And that's the success of the kingdom of Rome, which we're still living in the exile of. As we've said many times, Rome becomes the Holy Roman Empire, neither holy nor Roman nor an empire, which becomes the Western world, which becomes the Western society, the secular culture of denial, of pleasure seeking in which we live today. And basically that's what they've done to the Jewish people, one way or another, either by killing us physically, annihilating us, putting us through a Holocaust, or a silent Holocaust of the spirit by embracing us like the brother, like Esav does. I'm your brother, I'm Esav, your brother, I'll give you a big hug, come down to the beach. What are you guys sitting around there fasting on Tisha B'Av for? Come on, let's go down to the beach. It's a beautiful field. We've turned the Beis HaMikdash into a theme park. And that's the greatest tragedy. It says, I heard from Rav Bulman Zatzal, I think he said in the name of one of the Gedolim from the previous generation, on Tisha B'Av we have to cry because we can't cry. You can't. We're a generation of Yaakov ben Yaakov. In the Ashkenazi tradition, you never name a son after his father, except in one circumstance, where the father died before the son was born, in the 9 months of gestation and pregnancy. And that's who we are. We don't know what it was. We have to cry because we don't know what it is, what we've lost. That's Tisha B'Av, and that's why maybe it could be that this plowing over of the ruins of the Beis HaMikdash is such a tragedy that we've lost all connection to that spirituality. We have to cry that we don't know what it is we're crying about. And of course, Tisha B'Av is a day traditionally of great tragedy. 1492, Tisha B'Av is when Don Isaac Abarbanel led the Gerush Sfard, the exile from Spain in 1492. Tisha B'Av, all through history, Tisha B'Av has been a day of tragedy. The First World War, one of the days on the First World War actually broke out on a few days, a whole period of about 4 or 5 days. One of those days was Tisha B'Av. And in 1942, on Tisha B'Av, the first trains left the Warsaw Ghetto on their way to, I think it was to Treblinka. That's when the days that the killing started in the camps, the deportations from the Warsaw Ghetto. Day of tragedy throughout all of Jewish history. And as we said before, these things are not coincidental. These events all stem from the same spiritual landscape, from that original mistake of the sin of the spies and what that caused. Ben HaMitzarim, between these 2 points of tsar, of pain, of constriction, Mitzrayim, by the way, comes from the same root, Meitza Yam, Mitzrayim, it's a different idea, it constricted. We spoke about this in the time of Shavuos, of Yam. Yam is 50. 50 is that supernal number that goes beyond 49, which is 7 times 7, which is the week as we understand it. Everything in this world is 7 colors in the rainbow, 7 days in the week, 7 notes in the diatonic scale. 7 by 7 is the maximum extrapolation of 7, and what comes beyond that is 50. So Yam Mitzrayim was that power that was Meitzah the Yam, restricted the Jewish people from being able to reach that point of spirituality. And when we broke out, and our destiny was to travel after receiving the Torah to Eretz Yisrael, as we spoke, I think last week or the week before, about this idea of the terrible discontinuity that the generation, that the people, the Jewish people, our ancestors who came out of Mitzrayim, they were the same ones who were supposed to come into Eretz Yisrael. And the fact that it wasn't the same generation constructed or caused a disconnect which we feel to this day. 5 tragedies happened on Shavas B'Tammuz, and 5 tragedies happened on Tisha B'Av. 5. 5 in Hebrew, the number 5 is represented by He. He is the letter in the Jewish, in the Hebrew alphabet, which expresses giving. Heilach. Heilach. For example, it says in the Pasuk in Bereshis, Vayomi Yosef el ha'am, Joseph said to the people, Hein konisi eschem, behold, I have acquired you, Hayom, v'asmad admaschem, and your land, lefaro, He lechem, Heilach, He lechem, take, zera, seed, v'zratem es ha'adamah, and seed the land. He, the letter, and if you think about it, really, the He is just an aspirant without any kind of consonant. If you think of the most natural process in the human production of sound, it's the most elemental sound. The mere act of breathing gives you that sound. Just the mere fact you breathe out, he. So that's the most elemental form of giving out, which is the breath which comes from a person, is the sound of the he. Heilach. So a he expresses giving. He means expresses giving. Heilach. So in Yud Kei Vav Kei, which is the way that we talk about the Tetragrammaton, Hashem's ineffable name of 4 letters, you'll notice there are two letters. There's the Yud and the He, and the Vav and the He. So what does this mean? So the idea, therefore, is that Hashem, so to speak, was He, Yud. He gave us Yud, Vehe, the Vav. What does the Yud stand for? What does the Vav stand for? Let's start with the Yud. So let's understand, first of all, Hashem created the world in order that, and of course, in order that He could reveal Himself through His names. I'll try and explain what I mean. A name has no relevance unless it relates to other people. A person's name has no reality, no mashma'ut, no significance, klape atzmo, with regard to himself. All names relate to the expression, the relationship to something outside. And of course, in Judaism, the name of something is of its essence. Names in Hebrew are not, coincidental. They are essential. They represent the essence of that particular thing. When a parent gives a child a name, Chazal teaches that there's a certain siyata d'shmaya, certain, spiritual help that a parent gets to be able to intuit the correct name to express the neshama of that baby, of that child in the world. To the extent that, chas v'chalila, God forbid, if somebody becomes seriously ill, they will often add another name, because the name is the spiritual pipeline by which somebody has the chiyus to exist in this world. And therefore, so to speak, we add another pipe to this neshama to bring the koyach down to that soul. A name is something which reveals. The Torah is the way that Hashem reveals Himself in this world. The Ramban says at the beginning of Bereshis that the Torah is none other than the names of Hashem. That's all the Torah is. If we knew how to break up the words of the Torah in a certain way, we would be able to see that that's all the Torah is, the names of Hashem. The revelation of the Hashem, as we said, a name is a revelation klape chutz, towards the outside, the expression of the essence to another, to something outside itself. There's a famous medrash that says that HaKadosh Baruch Hu brought all the animals in front of Adam Rishon and asked Adam to name them. And Adam, in the same way as we were discussing before, was able to intuit the essence of every animal's nefesh, and he was able to name the animals accordingly. And at the end of this medrash, it's a very interesting moment. HaKadosh Baruch Hu turns around to Adam HaRishon and he says, and what is my name? And Hashem says, Yud-Ke. And Adam said to Hashem, your name is Yud-Ke Vav-Ke. So the name of Yud-Ke Vav-Ke is the way that Hashem, of course, we can't talk about anything about Hashem ba'atzmusa. But we can talk about Hashem in terms of the fact that he wants to be, so to speak, revealed in this world. Now the revelation of this world, which is connected with the Yud, is connected with Torah. It says that Istakel Kish Brichel Ba'araisa, Hava Mistakel Ba'araisa or Bara Alma, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu looked into the Torah and created the world. The world is no more, so to speak, than an expression of the Torah. The Torah is the thought of Hashem, and the world is the way those thoughts come into action, come into fruition. And that's why that it was possible for the Avot, the fathers, to keep all of the Torah before the Torah was given. Because if HaKadosh Baruch Hu looked into the Torah and created the world, then people on a very high spiritual level, like Avraham Avinu, were able to look into the world and see Torah. It's a symbiotic relationship, just like not symbiotic. It's the how do you say? It's the same process in reverse. Hashem looked into the Torah, and He created the world. Therefore, if you have eyes to see, you look into the world, you'll see Torah, and therefore they were able to keep all the Torah before it was actually given. So Hashem's his chabrusa, his connection, nowadays we probably call it his interface with his creation, comes through the names, which correspond to his divine attributes, and which is of course the way he interacts with the world, which is in the way that we perceive Hashem. Of course, Hashem is not rachamim, he's not rachum, he's not merciful, he's not kind. There's nothing we can talk about Hashem in his essence. What we can say is that we see that Hashem sometimes reveals himself through kindness, sometimes through strict justice. That is what it means when we talk about that Hashem reveals himself through the names. And as we said, the Ramban says all of the Torah is no more than the names of Hashem's names, revelations of Hashem. In other words, if you look at it the other way around, it means the entire world was created to reveal the Torah. That's one reason why Hashem created the world, was for the Torah to be revealed. And of course, when we talk about the Torah, that's his names, that's for him to be revealed in the world. Now, there's another aspect of Hashem's revelation in the world, which is for something which is called kavod. Kavod is, as it says, that Baruch Elokeinu she'baronu lichvodo. We say that Hashem created us for His honor. Now, when we talk about honor, it's difficult for us to understand kavod, real kavod, because we live in a world of anti-kavod. I think I've said many times that if you go into expensive restaurants nowadays, the guys who are wearing the torn jeans are ordering food from the guys wearing the dinner jackets. It's an upside-down world, and we have very little idea of what real kavod is. But Hashem created everything for His kavod. Why? Because through this we are able to establish a relationship with Him. Hashem doesn't need kavod, and in a sense we cannot. Us being mechabed Hashem, giving respect, honor, whatever you'll call it, to Hashem, adds nothing to Him in any way. Of course, axiomatically it can't. If we could give anything to Hashem, it means that in some way He was lacking that thing before, which means that in some way we just made Hashem more perfect, which of course is impossible, because axiomatically Hashem is that existence who's perfect in every way from the beginning. Elamai, Hashem created a situation through His revelation in this world that we are able to give Him kavod, and by us doing that we attach ourselves to Him. This is the process which is also called malchus, kingship. Ein melech belo uma. A king requires a people to be a king. Again, that doesn't make him less of a king if he doesn't have a people, but it means for his revelation in this way, that gives us an opportunity, so to speak, to be connected to Him in that way. So, and of course the place of the greatest revelation of kavod, of honor, is in the place where that kavod, the maximum kavod, is possible to be withheld. there's nothing less honorable or respectful than the demand for respect. The respect that a person gives when it's demanded from him is the greatest disrespect that can be. The greatest respect that can be has to come from a place where it's possible for that respect to be withheld to the greatest degree, which of course is the lowest of all worlds. In this, the lowest of all worlds, where Hashem's existence is extremely masked from us, we don't see. So therefore there's the greatest possibility of denial, the greatest possibility to withhold that respect, that recognition, and therefore the recognition that comes from that lowest world is also the greatest honor, which is really why we have an amazing opportunity. Because being placed in this world of the greatest possibility for ikavod, for disrespect, that also gives us the opportunity we are that creation which is able to give Hashem the greatest respect which is possible, because of that great hiddenness of Hashem in this lowest of all worlds. Please stop me if something I'm saying doesn't make sense to you or you want to argue with me. Okay. So we've got these two ideas. As we said, the he requires giving. Helach. Yud, and this is what I want to get to now, is connected to Torah. The first he in Hashem's name follows the letter Yud. The Yud indicates thought. Thought. The prefix Yud on a Hebrew verb transforms it into the future. The area, where thought lives is in the future. The realm of thought. That's what I wanted to say. The realm of thought is totally in the future. All thought relates to the future. The future exists only in the realm of thought. Maybe it's better to say it that way around. So the letter Hey, that first two letters of Yud Kei Vav Kei, of Yud and Hey, represents Hashem giving us the Yud, which means giving us His thought. What is His thought? The thought is the Torah, which are His names, His revelation, His intention. That's expressed by the first Yud. Yes?
What does the Torah have to do specifically with the future?
The Torah is Hashem's, so to speak, plan for the world. It's what He wants from the world. It is when Hashem, so to speak, the architect's plans for the world. Hashem looked into the Torah and created the world. The future thought of what Hashem, so to speak, wanted to do is in the Torah. The second gift from Hashem represents, as we said before, this idea of hamamlacha, kingship. The way that He expresses His monarchy over the world. Our responsibility, our ability, and chas v'chalila, our ability also to withhold our acknowledgement of Him as King. Hashem, so to speak, addresses, or if you like, relates to the world in two ways. First, through the revelation of His Torah, that's the Yud and the Hey, which are His names, His Chokhmah, His wisdom. And second, to reveal and to sustain His Malchus, His kingship, His kavod. Now, of course, the true place in which Hashem's names and His kavod, His honor, will be revealed is in the world to come, in the Olam Haschar, which, as Chazal teaches, is a place without eating or drinking, ein achila ve'ein shtia, but where the righteous, the tzaddikim yoshvim, they sit, when they derive hano from the splendor of Hashem's divine presence.
What's hana?
Hano means thank you, which means pleasure. That the Rambam understood as the das, the da'at, the knowledge that one receives there, a higher level of understanding. The more one sees, the more one realizes how much he doesn't know. At the crest of every mountain, a person finds himself at the foot of yet another mountain. And at the top of that one, another mountain, and so on and so on. The 5 things that happened on the 17th of Tammuz caused us to lose all that is represented by the first He, by the Yud. And on the 9th of Av, Hashem took away everything that was He with the Vav. Yud and He and Vav and He. So the Yud and He, the giving, the He of the Yud we lost on Shivas B'Tammuz, and the He, the giving of the Vav, we lost on Tisha B'Av. So first of all, let's just talk about the destruction of Torah with Shivas B'Tammuz and all that represents. Well, clearly, obviously, that you don't have to look too far to see that on Shivas B'Tammuz was the day that the luchos, the tablets on which the 10 Commandments were hewn, were broken. The second thing was the daily Tamid sacrifice ceased, the walls of Yerushalayim were breached, apostolos burned the Torah, and an idol was erected in the Heichal, the hall of the Beis HaMikdash. So, essentially, the breaking of the luchos is something that includes the burning of the Torah. The Torah has been burnt, but could never have been burnt in the first place had it not been for the original Shviras HaLuchos, the breaking of the tablets. The breaking of the tablets right back there at the beginning of the Torah's giving meant that there was the possibility for the Torah to be burnt. And there's a custom for some people have a custom to fast on Erev Shabbos Pashas Pinchas, because in the, I'm terrible with dates, I think it was in the 1290s, French King Charles XII, I think it was, don't hold me to that, he burnt wagons and wagon loads of Torahs, of Gemaras, pretty much all the Torah knowledge in Europe at that time. It was a terrible tragedy. It's difficult for us to appreciate that because now with printing, and not only just printing, with virtual printing, with the access of the information age to everything, anywhere, kimat. But to understand what that meant was the destruction of all of the knowledge, pretty much all of the knowledge in medieval Europe, Jewish knowledge. That could never have happened was it not for the fact that there was an original breaking of the luchos in the time of Moshe Rabbeinu. So that clearly is where the Yud, the Chochmah of the Torah, was taken away from us. That Hashem was Yud, He took the Yud and He was He gave us that Yud. On Shivas B'Tammuz that was taken away. Each Torah scroll embodies the experience of receiving the Torah. And as we said, it was only possible to burn the Torah because the luchos were broken. Okay, that's the first thing. Now the Tamid, the Korban Tamid, that was also ceased on Shivas B'Tammuz in the time of the first Beis HaMikdash. Even though that sacrifice could be revived and was revived, the essence of the Korban Tamid is that it was Tamid. Tamid means constant. It was brought every single day, and it had been brought every single day until the Shivas B'Tammuz. That was the day when the Babylonians broke into the city. They could no longer find suitable animals. So the continuity from Sinai, which had continued until that day, that was irretrievably lost. True, you could bring the Korban Tamid again, but it wouldn't be the same Korban Tamid because there was a disconnect which was irretrievable. Of course, also, it reflects in its own way a disconnect from a situation where at Har Sinai we received the Torah. So in a sense, that was also connected to a disconnect in the Torah itself. And the fifth thing was an idol in the Heichal. An idol was set up. And of course, this has to be understood on a deeper level. It's not just the fact that a person worships an idol. In a sense, the idol, so to speak, was placed at Sinai. It shattered the covert of Sinai. The Beis HaMikdash embodied the kavod, the honor, the glory of Sinai. And when an idol was put there, that, so to speak, was the maximum disrespect that could possibly be. It was a reversal of the Torah, yeah.
So, do we know how many years the continuity was until it was cut?
I'm not so good at mathematics, but we could make that sum afterwards.
2448 is the beginning of the Torah.
Okay, so
Yes, right.
right,
Yeah.
and the Babylonian, when was the Babylonian conquest? When did the Babylon? When the
BCE,
586?
BCE, but that's, I don't know what that is in.
586.
Yeah.
So they
Okay, so it's from now. It's from now. 2000 and you said 86.
Yeah.
Right.
There's different days for it, but like that's the one that I.
2899. No, 2901.
okay.
Or 9, sorry, 2909. And now we are in. Okay, so that's the number. So now we're in 29. Will be the year.
But maybe we'll get that more accurate.
Like around 400 years. That's the Horits around 400
Yeah.
years of Korban Tamid.
Oh, the first temple lasted 410 years.
No, we're not talking about that. How long was it from Har Sinai till the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash? Okay, so I have to apologize. My knowledge of dates are rather imprecise. But anyway, let's move on and talk about now the sorry, that wasn't the fifth. That was the fourth thing. The fifth thing was the breach of the city. The city was breached on the 17th of Tammuz, which means that the kavod of Sinai continued through the Beis Hamikdash. Ma'amad HaSinai, the experience of standing and receiving the Torah, was embodied by Yerushalayim. Ma'amad HaSinai, the idea of all the Jewish people being together, Ke'ish echad b'lev echad, that was epitomized by Yerushalayim. And with the breaking of the walls of Yerushalayim, that was destroyed. We know that all Klal Yisrael entered from one gate in Yerushalayim, and as we know by Har Sinai, as I said before, Ke'ish echad b'lev echad, one person with one heart. So the unity of receiving the Torah was shattered through the breach of the city. Yerushalayim is surrounded by walls. Had its doors not been locked tonight, it would have been a Reshus Harabim, the Gemara says. And which, of course, according to the Gemara says, that's not fitting for Yerushalayim. Yerushalayim has to be a Reshus Yochid, and that's why when the doors were locked, it was a Reshus Yochid. That happened until the walls, were breached. That, so to speak, exposed everything that was private. So to speak, the reversal of Yerushalayim's unity, of that Achdus expressed by Yerushalayim, was like an entire house being reduced back to stones. The Lashon of Chibur, of connection, if you take that word, you can make it also into Charev, destruction, same letters, Chibur, Charev. The reverse of that connection is when, and it too reflected the loss of the Torah represented by the first hair. There are 22 days, if I'm not mistaken, between the beginning of the month of Tammuz and the 9th of Av. Those are the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet, which consist of the chibur, of the connection of thought, the connection of thought into ideas, into words. And they are, so to speak, sit on the ground. These are the days where the stones which are the chibur, become a churban.
I don't know if it's going to come up, but can you speak briefly of the loss of the vav more so?
We're going to. So that was so to speak, the upper hay, the Torah, the Yud. If you think about it, a Yud and a Vav are quite similar. A Vav is really a connection of the Vav as it comes down into this world, which is appropriate when we're talking about the Kavod of Hashem, which is, so to speak, the manifestation of whatever the Yud is in this world. So, and that's the disaster of Tisha B'Av. That's the second part of the destruction. 5 things, as we said, happened on Tisha B'Av. First of all, it was decreed that our forefathers would not enter the land, and that was the decree of all the exiles. It was really wrapped up in that decree. It says, Pasuk in Tehillim, V'yisi yodo lahem lahapil osam b'midbar, that Hashem raised up His hand to bring them down in the midbar, in the desert. Ulahapil zaram b'goyim ulazarosam ba'artzos, and also bring down their seed amongst the nations, and their seed in the lands. So, in that disaster was also, in that exile, in that inability to enter the land, the exile which was decreed on Tisha B'Av, that was also contained within all the other exiles. On that day of Tisha B'Av, the first and second Batei Mikdash were destroyed, and the city of Beitar, which was the last major holdout against the Romans, was destroyed. Yerushalayim, as we said before, was plowed over. And really that was the destruction of Malchus. The destruction of the 2 Betei Mikdash. First of all, the idea is that the disconnect, as we said before, between the generation, the Jewish people who came out of Mitzrayim, who were not allowed, who could not enter Eretz Israel as a result of that disaster. This was a breakdown, so to speak, in the Malchus of Hashem, of the revelation of Hashem in this world. That was a lacking. Had it been not for that decree, the Malchus would have been part of our essence. As a result of that decree, we lost our sovereignty. If it would have been the same people who left Mitzrayim, who came into Eretz Israel, then Hashem's Malchus would have been apparent to the world. And now, seeing as it happened like that, we don't have that Malchus. So as we said, the second and third tragedies were the destruction of the Batei Mikdash. And of course those destructions represent the ultimate loss of sovereignty. And that's reflected in Nebuchadnezzar's treatment of King Tzidkiyahu. He killed all his children in front of him. He gouged out his eyes. And the Gemara says that that really was the end of Malchus based of it. The death of, not the death of Tzidkiyahu, you took him back to, but Tzidkiyahu's disgrace led him back to Bavel, and that was the end of the Malchus of Beis David, and of course the Malchus of Beis David is a reflection of the Malchus of Hashem. The fourth tragedy was the destruction of Beitar. Now in Beitar there was an opportunity. There was a king in Beitar who was known as Bar Koziva or Bar Kochba, who Rabbi Akiva and all the rabbis of that time thought was Mashiach. The Rambam brings that. Now, it has to be understood, when Rabbi Akiva thought that Bar Koziva was Mashiach, it's not that he made a mistake. Rabbi Akiva doesn't make mistakes. It meant that he had the potential to be, he was Mashiach, that the generation was not Roy. The generation was not fit for Mashiach to appear in his time. But what that meant with this destruction of Beitar, the last hope of returning sovereignty, of restoring that lower hair, the hair, the vav that was given, the hair that gave us the vav, that lower sovereignty, the manifestation of Hashem in this world through his malchus, that was lost. Beitar fell to the Romans, and there was a terrible carnage there. And in point of fact, we have the fourth bracha in Birkas Hamazon to commemorate the miracle that their bodies were not allowed to be brought to burial for many, many years, but they didn't decompose. And that miracle we commemorate in the fourth bracha to this day of Birkas Hamazon.
Bar Kokhba was thought to be the Mashiach?
Yeah, by Rabbi Akiva and the Gedolim of that time. There's a concept that in every generation, Mashiach, there is Mashiach, but the generation has to be roy, the generation has to be fit. So it wasn't that Rabbi Akiva was wrong, it was the time wasn't right. And then we said the Turnus Rufus plowed over the city, we spoke about that before. Sion, Sadeh Techoresh, that's the fifth tragedy. Avraham Avinu called the Beis HaMikdash a Ha. Yitzhak called it a Sadeh. And finally Yaakov called it a Beit, a Bayit. Kiyim Zeh Beit Elokim. This must be the house of Hashem. And that was all before there was a house there at all. Turnus Rufus turned everything back and negated the possibility of it being called a house. He turned it back into a Sadeh. The Rambam added that Turnus Rufus plowed the Heichal, as I said before, and its surroundings. And the Heichal is a throne room. It's the place of the kavod of the king. Heichal is a throne room. In other words, his intent was to uproot that aspect which is called Bayit, which is the Heichal. That was the culmination of destruction of what we call Malchus and covered, and we lost that second He, what that second He gave us. So, the Jewish people live in a space which consists of these two things, of the acceptance of the Torah and our job to reveal the Malchus of Hashem in this world. That's what we're here for. In these times, we have nowhere to turn. If we lose both those things, and that's the time we're now, the Bein Hazmarim, we're in a very vulnerable place. Hashem created us to live in that reality, in the reality of Torah, and the reality of Kovod, reality of Kiddush Shem Shemayim, of the revelation of Hashem in this world. We're in a situation, in a generation, where the Kovod of Hashem is extremely low. It's unfortunate to say that the way many secular people in this country look at religious people, and I'm not going to say why that is, and there are maybe many reasons, but what each one of us can do to raise up the Kovod of Hashem in the eyes of the Jewish people, in the way that we behave to each other. It's not just in the way we behave clearly when we go out into the secular world. I never forget the first time I put a couple on my head. I went to this bookstore in Manhattan, and there was this big carousel of various different Orthodox Jewish headwear. There were white ones and blue ones and ones that looked like they came off the head of an Afghan sheep herd. And I don't know why, but for some reason I picked up this big black couple and put it on my head, and it stayed there ever since. And I walked out into the street and I realized everything had changed. Everything had changed. I said, you've just become an ambassador. You're an ambassador for the Jewish people. Now everything that you do, you're not your own man anymore. You're a representative. If you push in line in the drugstore, it won't be who's this guy pushing in line. It's going to be who's this Jew pushing in line. In line. And if you get up on the subway for an old lady, you'll have just been Mekadosh Shem Shemayim. When I get onto a plane nowadays, Baruch Hashem bless me that I'm quite tall. So I always try and find some short secular lady struggling with her suitcase to try and, you run over there, lob it up, you just mean Mekadosh Shem Shemayim in front of 400 people. A Jew, this is the sensitivity a person has to walk around with. I have to raise up the Kovod of Hashem in this world. That's our job in these very, as I say, fraught days of conflict in this land, this holy land, which is viewing a tremendous And again, I'm not getting into politics. I have my own politics, I have my own views, and I'm not going to express them here, I think. But what's important is to see for sure that what's going on here is a tremendous tumult, a tremendous turmoil, a time of Bein HaMetzarim, where we're really shut in here, closed in, compressed, and the only way out of this narrow space is to restore the Yud and the Vav. The Yud to bring He, the Hashem should be bring back. He will give us back the Yud. He will give us back the Vav. And the way we do that is to express our love of Torah by exerting ourselves as much as we can, and that's the Yud. And by being Mekadosh Shem Shemayim whenever we can. And again, Kiddush Shem Shemayim, as I started to say, doesn't just mean when you go out and in the outside world. That's for sure. But Kiddush Shem Shemayim is between you and your roommate as well. The way you behave to the people who are nearest and dearest to you, that's probably the biggest Kiddush Hashem. Because fortunately, unfortunately, those people who know you the most are your family and your friends, and you can't pull the wool over their eyes. So when a person thinks about his responsibility, thinks about the fact that I'm a Jew, that I have a tremendous privilege, as we said many times before, there's no privilege without responsibility. I have this privilege to be an Olam Haba, to be a recipient of the Torah, to be part of Am HaNivcha, Am HaKodesh, a holy nation. Mamleches Kohanim V'Goy Kodosh. Privileges. What's my responsibility? My responsibility is to learn as much as I can, as hard as I can, even when it's difficult. Learning can be very difficult. But you know something? That's my job. A person turns up every day, he does the job. Sometimes it's better, sometimes not, but he turns up every day. Hatmada. What's the word in English? Hatmada, hasmada, I can't think of the word in English. Application. It's more than that, it's like constancy. Consistency. Consistency in my learning and my awareness that I am an ambassador. I'm an ambassador to the world. I'm an ambassador to my family and to my friends. With these two things, if we have these in mind in these very, very dark days, B'ezrat Hashem, this Tisha B'Av, we will not be sitting on the floor, but we will be welcoming B'ezrat Hashem, the coming of Mashiach Tzidkenu.